When Alex and I arrived in Winston, I probably felt for the first time in a long while that I could truly breathe freely. Our house was exactly the kind I had always dreamed of. A small cottage with a porch where I could sit in the mornings, sipping coffee and watching the quiet street. Everything was so peaceful. It even seemed to me as if someone had turned off all the noise and chaos of the world, leaving only the birdsong and the rustling of the wind through the leaves. How do you like it? Alex, leaning against the doorframe, was looking at me with a smile. His eyes were glowing. He was truly happy. This is exactly what we need, I replied, trying not to reveal my doubts. Of course, I wanted to believe that this move was the right step, but after the hustle and bustle of New York, it was hard for me to imagine how I would fit into such a quiet and measured life. Alex came closer, put his arm around my shoulders, and I once again felt that same confidence he always brought with him. When we first started dating, he was the one who always knew how to make everything seem simple. Just like now. I've been dreaming about this for a long time, he said, glancing around. A cozy house, a garden. We deserve this. You deserve this. I nodded silently, pressing closer to him. In his arms, everything seemed right, but inside me, there was still something uncertain. Something I couldn't quite understand yet. Our first few weeks in Winston passed in peace and quiet. I gradually got used to the slow pace of life, spending my days in the garden, reading books, or simply enjoying the silence. But even in this quiet, I felt like something was missing. Maybe interaction. One day, when Alex was at work again, there was an unexpected knock on the door. Opening it, I saw a couple. A man and a woman in their 40s. They were holding a basket filled with homemade wine and fruit. Hi, we're your neighbors. I'm Melanie, and this is Kevin. The woman extended her hand with a wide smile. We live across the street and thought it was time to introduce ourselves. Oh, how kind of you. I smiled warmly in return, feeling relieved by their friendliness. I'm Emily. My husband Alex is at work, but I'm sure he'll be happy to meet you later. Well, we won't keep you long. We just wanted to bring a welcome gift. This wine is from our little family winery, Kevin added, handing over the basket. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. These people were kind, genuine, and I realized that perhaps Winston wouldn't be such a lonely place after all. By the way, we usually host dinners with friends and neighbors, Melanie continued. Maybe you'd like to join us this weekend? It's a great way to meet the locals. Alex and I would love to come, I replied. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine interest in something new. A few days later, Alex and I went to that dinner. Melanie and Kevin turned out to be wonderful people, and their wine was exquisite. We laughed, shared stories about our life in New York, and they told us about their winery and how important it was to support small local communities. You know, people here really care about each other, Kevin said at one point during the evening, raising his glass. We're glad you decided to become part of this. I felt like I was becoming part of something bigger than just a quiet life in a small town. We had made friends with whom we could share not only wine, but also our new life in Winston. Over time, life in Winston began to settle into a familiar rhythm. Alex became immersed in his work, and to my surprise, his career started to take off rapidly. In the small town, he found something that had been missing in New York: focus and clarity. You have no idea, Emily, he said one evening over dinner. I finished the project and it's been noticed. It looks like I'm in for a promotion. I smiled, feeling proud of him. Alex had always been a workaholic, but in recent months, it was as if he had found his true calling. However, with success came changes. Soon, his work began to demand more time, more trips. I'll have to go to Chicago for a couple of days, he told me one morning, already getting ready for work. It's important, but I'll be back soon. All right, don't worry, I replied, trying to hide my disappointment. Everything will be fine. At first, the business trips were short, and I found ways to occupy myself in his absence. I walked around the neighborhood, tended to the garden, and met with Melanie and Kevin. Our neighbors were becoming closer to us, and every time Alex returned, we would host a dinner or a picnic with their wonderful wine. However, over time, Alex's trips began to last longer. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself alone more and more often. He always called, telling me about his travels and how work was going, but I could feel our connection becoming more superficial. There was less warmth in his voice, fewer of the familiar notes that made our conversations feel so intimate. "I'm sorry, darling," he would say over the phone from yet another hotel. "This time I'll have to stay longer, but I'll bring you something special from San Francisco." I tried not to show how much I missed him. Alex was happy with his success, and I didn't want to become a burden. Instead, I immersed myself in household tasks, met new people, and gradually grew into life in Winston. Melanie and I often met for coffee, discussing life and our families. It gave me the feeling that I wasn't completely alone. But each time Alex left, a strange sense of emptiness grew inside me. One day, while Alex was away on another business trip, I decided to take a walk through the forest near our home. The dense trees, fresh air, and the quiet of the woods helped distract me from thinking about his absence once again. I was walking along the path, enjoying the peace, when I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw a man in a green jacket with the word Ranger on the sleeve. His hair was slightly tousled, and a light smile played on his face. "Hey, I wasn't expecting to see anyone out here so early," he said, approaching. "I'm Jacob, the local ranger. It's usually pretty empty around this time." "Hello," I replied, feeling a bit taken aback. "I'm Emily. I'm new here. I decided to take a walk to get to know the area better." "Nice to meet you, Emily. If you ever have any questions about the forest or need any help, I'm always happy to assist." Jacob extended his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, I shook it. We chatted a bit about the forests around Winston, how he takes care of the trees and watches over the wildlife. Jacob was pleasant and easy to talk to. His laid-back demeanor put me at ease. I hadn't expected a conversation with a stranger to be so warm and effortless. "If you'd like, I can show you the best trails. There are a few beautiful spots that tourists don't usually visit," he offered, pointing deeper into the forest. "That would be great," I agreed, surprising even myself. We walked through the thick woods, and Jacob pointed out trees and flowers, speaking about the life of the forest as if he were a part of it. I felt free, as if all the weight of the past months had lifted during this walk. "This forest is my life," Jacob admitted as we reached a clearing with a small stream. "Everything here is real. Out here, people don't wear masks like they do in the cities." His words struck a chord with me, and I began to think. Maybe that was what I had been missing in my life. Simplicity, sincerity, and honesty with myself. "Thank you for showing me this place," I said, feeling a strange warmth inside. I never imagined Winston hid such beauty. "You're always welcome. If you want, come to the forest more often. I'm here almost every day." We said our goodbyes, and I returned home feeling lighter. Jacob was an unusual person, and his company had given me something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of genuine connection, free from masks and formalities. With each passing day, my walks in the forest became more regular, and almost every time I would accidentally run into Jacob. He was always polite, friendly, and passionate about his work, and I enjoyed our easy conversations. At first, it was just a coincidence. I'd walk along familiar paths, and he would happen to be nearby, checking trees or patrolling the area. But soon I started to realize that I was looking forward to these encounters. "Hey, it's you again," Jacob said one day when he saw me on the trail. "Looks like you're falling in love with the forest as much as I have." I laughed. "I think you're right. It's so peaceful here." We walked through the woods, talking about everything under the sun. He told me about the local flora and fauna, how the forest changes with the seasons. His passion for nature was contagious, and I couldn't help but embrace his view of the world, where everything seemed simple and natural. "In the forest, everything's honest," Jacob said once, sitting with me on a fallen tree. "No pretense, just you and nature. People don't hide behind words here." I listened to him and realized that these words resonated with me on a deeper level than just philosophy about nature. At some point, I began to understand that our meetings were becoming more than just accidental and friendly. I enjoyed his attention, his quiet care, and how easily we could find common ground. Jacob gave me a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Every time I came home, I found myself thinking about our next encounter. With each passing day, that feeling grew stronger. Alex continued his business trips, and I tried to fill the void of his absence with my interactions with Jacob. But inside me, something bigger was brewing, something I was trying not to acknowledge. One day, while sitting with him by a small stream, I felt our conversations become more personal. Jacob started talking about his life, how he ended up in Winston, how he had searched for himself in the big city but found peace of mind only here, among nature. "You've found something here too, haven't you?" he asked softly, looking at me. I didn't know what to say. Everything seemed so innocent, but inside me, something else was happening. That moment when I realized that my feelings for Jacob went beyond mere friendship was a turning point. I didn't know how to handle it. Alex returned after another long business trip, and this time his arrival was special. He looked relaxed and happy, as if the long flights and meetings hadn't worn him out. In the evening, he announced that he had planned something special for us. "I realized we haven't spent much time together lately," he said, setting the table in our small garden. "I invited Kevin, Melanie, and Jacob as well. They're such important people to us, and I thought it'd be great to spend the evening in their company." My heart skipped a beat when I heard Jacob's name. I hadn't expected to see him so soon, especially at an event like this. Mixed feelings washed over me. On one hand, I was happy that Alex was making an effort, but on the other, thoughts about Jacob continued to trouble me. Still, I pushed them aside, trying to focus on making this evening special. As the guests began to arrive, I noticed how cozy and comfortable everyone was together. Alex joked as usual, showing off his culinary skills, while Melanie and Kevin discussed plans for their winery. Jacob arrived last, reserved yet still attentive as always. When our eyes met, I felt something strange. His presence was a troubling reminder of everything that had been happening over the past few weeks. "So, Emily, what did you do while I was away?" Alex asked at the table, smiling. "I took a lot of walks, enjoyed nature," I replied, trying to sound casual. Jacob showed me some new trails, and it turns out there are even more beautiful places around here than I thought. Alex looked at me with a proud smile, and I saw how his eyes gleamed with happiness that I had found something new in our life here. But I also felt Jacob, sitting across from me, watching intently. His gaze was too familiar, too deep to ignore. The evening went on, and everyone seemed happy. Alex raised a toast to new friendships and new traditions. But despite all these moments, a growing unease built up in my heart. I looked at Alex, who was laughing and handing out glasses of wine, and realized that I was hiding something important from him, something that was only growing stronger with each passing day. As everyone began to leave, Jacob stayed behind for a moment, helping to clear the veranda. "You seem a little tense. Is everything all right?" he asked quietly, looking into my eyes. I didn't know what to say. Everything was both fine and not fine at all. A storm of conflict raged inside me, and I couldn't figure out how to deal with it. "Everything's fine," I replied, even though everything inside me felt completely different. When the door closed behind Jacob, I remained on the veranda alone. Alex was inside, making tea, and I stood there, looking up at the dark sky, feeling how my world was slowly changing. The evening with Alex, the neighbors, and Jacob became the beginning of an inner chaos that I could no longer ignore. When Alex left for another business trip, leaving me alone, I felt that the balance in my life was crumbling. Everything that once seemed right and stable now felt shaky and uncertain. The next day, Jacob came to our house. He said he had noticed that some of my plants in the garden were drying out and offered to help with watering and taking care of them. I hesitated but agreed, mainly because I couldn't bear being alone in the silence of the house. "Let me help with that," he said when he saw me struggling to move the heavy flower pots. "Thank you," I replied, feeling my heart beat faster in his presence. We worked together in the garden all day. The sun slowly set, and a warm glow bathed the entire yard. It was pleasant and peaceful, but along with that simple happiness came a growing tension. I saw how Jacob looked at me, and I understood that something more than just friendship had developed between us. When all the work was done, we sat on the porch to rest. I was pouring tea, and Jacob silently watched me as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. "Did you want to ask me something?" I broke the silence. "Emily." He looked at me, his voice quiet and serious. "You know there's something more between us than just friendship." I froze. In that moment, all my defenses crumbled. We were sitting so close that I could hear his breathing. My mind protested, but my heart said otherwise. "Jacob, this isn't right," I whispered, lowering my eyes. But he couldn't stop. His hand gently touched mine, and in that moment, everything happened too quickly. We locked eyes, and the tension I had been trying to ignore for so long became undeniable. Slowly, we leaned toward each other, and before I could fully comprehend it, our lips met. The kiss was soft, but filled with everything that had built up between us over the past few months. My head was full of contradictions, but at that moment, I couldn't stop. Time seemed to stand still. All the words, thoughts, and fears disappeared. There was only him, and only that moment. When we pulled away, I felt that everything had changed. I had crossed the line I had been afraid to step over. My heart pounded in my chest, and I didn't know what to say. "I can't," I whispered, standing up and walking into the house, leaving him alone on the porch. That evening, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Thoughts of Alex, of the kiss with Jacob, and of what would happen next tormented me. I knew I could no longer live as I had before. When Alex returned from his latest business trip, I realized I couldn't carry the burden of what had happened any longer. That night when Jacob and I crossed the line, everything changed. With each passing day, the guilt grew, and hiding the truth from Alex became unbearable. I knew I had to confess, no matter how painful it would be. We were sitting in the kitchen having dinner as usual, while Alex laughed and told me stories about his work trips and new colleagues. His calmness and happiness only intensified my inner tension. "Emily, are you okay?" he asked, noticing how tightly I was gripping the fork in my hand. My heart tightened, and I knew I couldn't delay this conversation any longer. "Alex, we need to talk," I whispered, my voice trembling. He immediately stopped talking, his smile fading, and worry appeared in his eyes. He set down his utensils and looked at me intently. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone becoming tense. I couldn't meet his eyes. Summoning all my willpower, I told him everything. About my frequent meetings with Jacob, how I began to develop feelings for him, and finally, about the kiss that had changed everything. As I spoke, I saw his face shift, first in shock, then in pain, and finally, in anger. "Are you serious?" His voice turned icy. "You kissed another man while I was away, while I was working for us?" "Alex, I couldn't find the words. My guilt was laid bare before him, raw and undeniable. "I don't know how it happened. I was confused. It's not what I wanted." He jumped up, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "Confused? You were confused, Emily?" His voice cracked. "I trusted you. We moved here to start a new life, to be happy. And you... His words felt like blows. I knew that my choices had shattered everything. He slowly walked over to the window, staring out of it as if trying to make sense of what had happened. "I love you, Alex," I said through my tears. "I don't want this to destroy our marriage. I was confused, but now I understand. It was a mistake, and I'm ready to fix it." "Fix it?" He turned sharply toward me. "How are you going to fix this, Emily?" "You betrayed me." Silence fell between us, and I couldn't speak. His disappointment and pain pierced through every part of me. "Maybe you should leave for a while," he said coldly, staring at the floor. "I need time to think about what to do next." I felt desperation rising in my chest. We were both standing on the edge of the destruction of everything we had built together over the years. I slowly left the room, leaving him alone. This was the end of our old life, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to regain his trust. That night, I slept in the guest room, listening to every sound in the house. Alex didn't come to me, and I knew that something important between us had changed forever. The next few days after my confession felt like a nightmare. Alex and I barely spoke. He would leave for work earlier than usual and come back late, and when he was home, there was a tense silence between us. I tried to find the words to fix things, but every time I opened my mouth, I felt like I was only making it worse. I realized that my whole life was hanging by a thread, and the scariest part was that I didn't know if I could change anything. The guilt over what had happened never left me, but deep down, I kept asking myself, how had I let my feelings for Jacob become so strong? One day, while Alex was at work, I decided to meet with Jacob. I knew it would be difficult, but I couldn't delay the conversation any longer. I needed to put everything in its proper place. We met in the forest where it had all begun. When he saw me, his face lit up with a mix of concern and hope. Emily, I know how you feel. I'm confused too, he began, before I had a chance to say anything. I sighed, feeling a lump form in my throat. I looked at Jacob, and in his eyes, I saw honesty but also pain. He had been an important part of the last few months of my life, but I knew this was all wrong. Jacob, I can't keep this going, I said, feeling the words struggle to come out. I shouldn't have let it go this far. Alex is my family, my husband. I love him, and I have to try to fix this. He froze, his eyes darkening, but he quickly composed himself. I understand, he replied quietly, nodding. I knew this might happen, but I hoped that maybe we could. I cut him off, knowing that if I let him continue, it would only make saying goodbye harder. I can't destroy my marriage. It's my responsibility, and I have to try. I made a mistake, Jacob, and now I have to make the right choice. He remained silent, looking off into the distance. The silence between us hung for a long time. I knew he wanted to say more, but he didn't. His respect for my decision, despite the pain he was feeling, was evident. If that's your choice, I won't stand in your way, he finally said, looking me in the eyes. You deserve to be happy, and if that's with Alex, then I wish both of you the best. Those words broke me. I had never wanted to hurt him, but I knew that continuing to see him would be an even greater betrayal to everyone. I said goodbye to Jacob and walked away, feeling the weight of his parting gaze follow me all the way home. When I returned, I saw Alex sitting on the porch holding a glass of wine. His expression was tired but calm. He had been waiting for me. You met with him, didn't you? He asked quietly, not taking his eyes off the horizon. I nodded, barely able to hold back my tears. And what did you decide? His voice was tense, but there was no anger, only pain and anticipation. I walked over to him, sat down beside him, and softly said, I chose you, Alex. I want us to be a family again. He stayed silent for a long time, looking at me, and I could see the emotions battling inside him. Then he took a deep breath and said, This won't be easy, Emily. I don't know if I can trust you again, but if you really want this, let's try. His words brought me both relief and fear. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to walk it for the sake of both of us. After that evening, everything changed. Alex and I made the decision to try to rebuild our marriage, but we both knew it wouldn't be easy. His trust in me had been shattered, and I knew it would take time and patience to regain it. But along with that realization came a sense of hope. That we had a chance to start over. The first few weeks were difficult. We tiptoed around each other, trying not to touch on sensitive topics. Alex was cold and distant, though he tried to hide it. His usual warm smiles and lighthearted jokes had disappeared, replaced by tense silence. I could see how much he struggled, trying to relearn how to trust me. Every morning, we started with small steps. We had breakfast together, trying to talk about simple, everyday things. Alex no longer went on long business trips, deciding that for now, he needed to focus on us and his work locally. We worked together in the garden, which became a symbol of our joint effort. Every planted flower and tended bush reminded me that rebuilding our marriage was like caring for the plants. It required patience, hard work, and care to make everything bloom again. One evening, as the sun was setting, we sat on the porch, just like we used to. Alex slowly shifted his gaze from the horizon to me and said, "I can see you're trying, Emily. And I'm trying too, but it's not easy." I nodded, feeling his words cut straight to my heart. There was so much I wanted to say, but I knew that words weren't as important now as actions. "I know I destroyed your trust, and I understand that things are different now. But I won't leave, and I won't give up." "You mean everything to me, Alex," I replied, gripping his hand tightly. He was silent for a moment, then relaxed slightly and said, "I don't want to give up either. It's hard, but maybe it's worth it." We looked at each other for a long time, and in that moment, I knew there was hope. It may have been a small spark, but it gave me the strength to keep going. Months passed, and gradually our relationship began to improve. We spent more time together, trying to be open and honest with each other. Sometimes we still fought, and sometimes the silence was unbearable, but we both knew we were moving in the right direction. One day, Alex suggested we take a short trip, just the two of us, like we did at the beginning of our marriage. We went to a small village by a lake where we could just be alone without distractions. "It's so quiet and peaceful here," I said, sitting by the shore and looking at the water. "It reminds me of why we decided to move to Winston." Alex smiled, sitting next to me and tossing pebbles into the water. "Yeah, back then we thought a quiet life would solve all our problems," he replied, his voice filled with a hint of sadness. "But the real problems weren't outside. They were inside us." I looked at him and realized he was right. This entire year had been a struggle not with circumstances, but with our inner demons, our past, our mistakes. But despite it all, we were here, together. "I think we've learned something important," I said softly, taking his hand. "Love isn't always about simplicity and ease. It's about work, the daily choice to stay together, even when it's hard." Alex squeezed my hand in return. "Yeah, and sometimes it's worth all the effort." We both sat there, savoring the moment. There was still a lot of work ahead, but I knew this experience had changed us both. We were stronger because we had gone through the difficulties and chosen each other again. Jacob left Winston shortly after our last conversation, and I hadn't heard from him since. His departure gave Alex and me the space to focus on us. The past remained in the past, and now I knew I was ready to move forward. With Alex, with our new beginning. And while there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, I felt confident that we would make it. Because true love isn't just about passion or perfect moments. It's about the ability to forgive, to fight, and to choose each other all over again every single day.